PlayStation 2 was home to some of the most iconic games of all time, and Dragon Ball was no exception. Beginning with the original Budokai in 2002 and ending its life cycle with the iconic Tenkaichi 3 in 2007, DBZ had an incredible 5+ year run on this legendary console, or so many of us thought. You see, there was still one more PS2 exclusive that would not only close out Dragon Ball's lengthy run on the console, but mark as a proper conclusion to the original Budokai series. That game was DragonBallZ Infinite World. Dubbed by much of the community as the long-desired Budokai 4, this title was initially released in 2008 and has, at least in my opinion, seen a recent rise in popularity due to it initially being slept on by the fans, with some even completely unaware of its existence at all. Understandably so. 2008 was 2 whole years after the PlayStation 3 had released, and Burst Limit, Dragon Ball's first title on the next generation console, had already been released in stores several months prior. However, while this title flew under the radar for many, it still holds some core memories for me. Infinite World was released on November 4th of 2008, which was a mere 2 weeks after my childhood back surgery, which resulted in me being out of school for nearly 3 entire months. And while the latter might sound great, it was actually a terrible experience for me. And considering I had already 100% Burst Limit, Infinite World released at seemingly the perfect time. I mean, I can vividly remember staying up endless hours just to 100% the skill list or beat the notorious Fighter's Road. But after I was done reminiscing, all this had me wondering, was Infinite World actually as good as I remember it to be? Or was it simply there for me at the right place and the right time? To figure out the answer to this burning question, I replayed Infinite World nearly 16 years later. And in this video, we'll discuss if Infinite World is actually the true successor to the Budokai series. If it's as good as fans claim it to be, is the game as difficult as many say that it is? And of course, the ins and outs of the title as a whole. Now, when beginning my playthrough, I quickly noticed that Infinite World takes massive inspiration from not only the most recent in the trilogy, Budokai 3, but pays homage to each entry in the numbered trilogy respectively. This I instantly recognized due to the format of the game's story mode, Dragon Mission, which takes some clear inspiration from Budokai 2's board game aesthetic. Only this time around, no matter who you're playing as, you'll only use the Goku character as opposed to chasing down enemies and collecting items, like in Budokai 2, which I personally enjoyed, but I'm well aware was a divisive addition to the gameplay. While advancing along the map, you'll also notice there are several unique points of interest, the most frequent being the face of another character, which features the next major battle in the storyline. You'll also come across Baba's crystal balls, which allow you to replay the fully animated cutscenes featured in game, which haven't been seen, at least of this caliber, since the original Budokai. Granted, they only appear for the most relevant of fights, and being acquainted with modern DBZ fighters, they're not anything to go absolutely berserk for. But in my opinion, the art style here is really cool, and for a late era PS2 game, I think it holds up pretty damn well. Another element of Dragon Mission that absolutely caught me off guard was that in between battles, you will embark on a plethora of mini games, which at first I wasn't entirely sold on, but I came to find that the variety of them is really quite impressive and truly helps this game stand out as its own unique title rather than being just a mashup of the best of the Budokai series. Sometimes these minigames will task you with a bit of platforming, navigating your way throughout iconic Dragon Ball environments, like making it to the end of Snake Way, which is a piece of the story that we very rarely get the opportunity to play through. These minigames will also feature battle events, like stopping Cell with appropriately timed Tri-Beam, or playing as villains like Frieza, ripping Piccolo to shreds with 1,000,007 death beams. I mean, chuckle beams. Some of these I even went super hard in, like the timed events, which were great for testing and strengthening my reaction time in my advanced stage. Still got it, boys. Now, I mention these minigames to such an extent because it's my belief that this is what the original Budokai was meant to entail originally. It just doesn't make much sense to include the full Nelson Raditz minigame, then just never do anything with that ever again. So long story short, perhaps here they got to fully see out their vision for the original Budokai in Infinite World. Last but definitely not least, the combat system. As soon as I began the first battle, I knew I was in for a great time. This is because the game carries over much of the same core functions as Budokai 3, like swiftly dodging opponents' blows, attack and guard throws, performing a teleport chain, and then teleporting on top of the teleports. You have a variety of attacks here, but I digress. These functions feel even more smooth and refined when compared to Budokai 3, almost as if they've learned more since then and mastered that combat system here. What does not carry over from Budokai 3, however, is Dragon Rush. Instead, we simply have Aura Burning Mode, in which you will gain a 5% boost to your stats, lessen your knockback, and gain the ability to absolutely abuse the teleport system at the exchange of your ki draining quite rapidly. This, in my opinion, is an incredible upgrade, as Budokai 3 is one of my all-time favorite DBZ games, yet Dragon Rush is one of my least favorite aspects of that game by far. It's just far too annoying and takes away from the good aspects of the gameplay for just a bit too long. However, while this can be great, unlike Hyper Mode, Aura Burning Mode will not drain your stamina. Instead, it will slowly deplete throughout battle, which can be quite frustrating, and worst of all, enemies will use this to absolutely spam Aura Burning Mode. And not only that, but you'll witness these AI using some advanced techniques, like combo cancels. Yet the game, despite having a fairly lengthy tutorial in the beginning of the Saiyan arc, will never mention or teach you how to perform these. Starting off in the Saiyan saga, there were times where I thought to myself, okay, Infinite World is just a bit more challenging than your typical DBZ game, but I really enjoy a challenge. Boy, did I take that back fast, because as soon as I got to the Frieza fight, that's when I realized how difficult this game can actually be. Previous to this, I was able to maintain some dignity and play through every stage on normal difficulty, but once I got here, I switched to easy, and then unapologetically very easy difficulty, and Frieza, he was still whooping my ass. I couldn't believe it. This point in the story is where I finally came to the realization that the game really isn't that difficult. It just wants you to use additional items to your advantage. As opposed to the previous Budokai entries, where these do exist but feel much more optional, Infinite World forces you to take advantage of these customization options by accessing the shop. Here you can use the Zenny you've acquired from battles to purchase numerous things like supers for your characters, upgrades to said supers for a steeper price, transformations, and new abilities like Fighter's Body, for instance, which will grant you a massive amount of additional health if you upgrade it enough times. Equipping a fully upgraded Fighter's Body, in addition to a couple attack boosts and a healing item like Pig Roast, will put you in a much better position. And with this knowledge, I could finally handle normal difficulty, even hard difficulty on some upcoming battles. I was feeling way more confident and beginning to really love this game. That being said, getting deeper and deeper into my playthrough, I ended up really enjoying the system here, as it forces you to take advantage of the customization and the items to make your favorite character truly feel like your own. Over time, making them more and more formidable against villains who feel rightfully powerful. Throughout the majority of your first playthrough, you will play solely as Goku, aside from a sprinkle or two of Son Gohan here and there. But you will also likely notice there's a ton of missions that are inaccessible at this time. Once completing Goku's story, you will gain the ability to go through the entirety of Dragon Mission once again, this time utilizing all of the characters who were unplayable on your first go-around, with the inclusion of some playable villains like Frieza and Cell, which again I found was organized strikingly similar to the original Budokai. It's worth noting that many of these battles will divert from the typical gameplay a bit, creating an environment where you must complete alternate tasks like survive for 60 seconds against a buffed up character, or even allowing you to choose between different paths of progression, with multiple battles becoming available at one time. My only downside though is that there aren't many cutscenes featured here in the second story, with the exception of some of the most relevant battles like Super Vegeta versus Semi-Perfect Cell, which is an all-time favorite of mine, and of course Gohan versus Cell, which I was extremely surprised wasn't featured in the original story. But again, I digress. This second story will also grant you access to a plethora of minigames and just about every relevant fight with the characters and transformations the game has, utilizing Frieza's numerous forms, which I always love when games do because I feel like these are often slept on and completely forgotten about. Beyond this, the game further covers the GT storyline, much more so than Budokai 3, including battles against iconic villains like Baby Vegeta, Super 17, and even Omega Shenron, and also features an additional arc called Another Story, in which you can fight movie favorites like Janemba, Cooler, Broly, and even play as Bardock. All of these unique characters bring the roster to a grand total of 42, which is only 4 more than Budokai 3, but interestingly enough, several Budokai 3 characters were actually swapped out, giving us nearly 10 new characters to the Budokai franchise, including Great Saiyan Man 2, wonder who that could be. Everyone everyone's favorite filler character, Pycon, and even Pen from GT, whose super attack I found surprisingly fun to pull off. And while the addition of GT characters is certainly a welcome change by me, controversially, 2 of these slots were designated to additional Goku and Vegeta characters from their GT personas, which on first glance seems a bit lame, but the differences in their combat style and their super attacks make them feel sincerely unique in comparison to their Z counterparts. Speaking of supers, each character for the most part will have 2 or 3 unique super attacks, which can be customized to your liking prior to engaging in battle. For the most part, these can either be purchased from the shop, or you can additionally save up to buy their upgraded level 2 and 3 versions at a much more hiked up price. Or in certain scenarios, your character will automatically have skills locked into your tray before battle. For the returning characters, you'll notice that many of these supers are carried over from the previous Budokai entry, but I thoroughly enjoyed exploring much of the new roster's moveset. Performing Final Flash as GT Vegeta without it being an ultimate just felt so seamless. As like many other elements of the gameplay, the majority of the ultimates maintain the same format as Budokai 3, where the player attempts to land a charged up blow and then tries to fill up their attack gauge more so than the AI by timing it to the best of their ability. If this is done efficiently, the onslaught will carry on longer, typically generating a significant amount of additional damage to the opponent. However, not every ultimate is created equal. Some perform more like beefed up super attacks, bypassing filling up the gauge entirely and simply launching a blast that is extremely tough to dodge. These attacks, like Piccolo's Special Beam Cannon or Teen Gohan's Super Kamehameha, ended up being some of my absolute favorites to pull off, not only due to the ease of them, but they also help speed up the ever so lengthy battle, which at times felt to go on for just a tad too long, especially if you're using a higher difficulty like I was in the game's secret unlock, Fighter's Road. In similar fashion to the games that came prior, Infinite World features several unique modes, with a mysterious additional mode only purchasable post-completion of the main story. This mode, in my opinion, is reminiscent of Budokai 3's Dragon Arena, as it's not only once again hosted by Commander Red, but you also fight opponent after opponent, each continuously becoming more and more difficult of an adversary, racking up tons of cash in the process. Assuming you have the money handy, you can also purchase additional difficulties for this mode, like Very Hard and Holy Z difficulty, which is extremely not as crazy as I expected it to be. While I assume this would prove way too much of a challenge for me as I progressed along this post-game mode. And don't get me wrong, there were certainly some challenging moments, but I beat just about every fighter on my first try. And that's because I had a pretty solid strategy nailed down by this point, along with my purchase abilities like Fighter's Body and Strength Boost. I also purchased further upgrades like additional spots on my skill tray, allowing for more abilities for my characters to utilize during battle, and I also began using Teen Gohan as a main, as once again his ultimate Super Kamehameha tends to hit much more frequently and has some great range. Utilizing Z difficulty will also grant you the most Zenny possible per each fight, allowing you to absolutely splurge in the shop, which granted sounds like it would be a lot more beneficial before beating story mode, but realistically is still much more useful than you'd probably imagine. This is because there are so many skills to purchase that if you want to go above and beyond and buy all of them, you'll have to spend some serious time in this mode. We both know you don't want to go through the entire game with just Kamehameha, so these and their expensive upgrades prove to be just about necessity for me. Along with all the other abilities we previously mentioned, each character can also be purchased in the shop upon completing their arc in the story, which also includes the option for additional costumes, with some, like Goku, having way more than others. Some of my favorites being Trunks' alternate skin and even battle damage Goku, whom I decided to take with me to Fighter's Road, even while knowing that Teen Gohan will be so much more efficient. Something about a shirtless Goku just looks so badass. Don't act like y'all don't know what I'm talking about. After completing the first page of Fighter's Road, similar to Dragon Mission, you can choose to play through different pages of the map, each having their own unique challenges and battles to fight through. I can only assume these get much harder as you progress, and if you guys would like to see me play through the entirety of Fighter's Road and buy out everything in the shop, then make sure to like this video and let me know in the comments if you guys want to see a part 2. Anyway, beyond Fighter's Road, there is, of course, maxing out your skill list, collecting the Dragon Balls through minigames, which grant you ultimates, additional costumes, or even items. In all honesty, I mean, you gotta do it once, but also wasn't really worth the hassle of the time devoted to collect all the Dragon Balls. It's worth pointing out that fusions also make a return to the game in the form of both Potara and Metamoran, which grant the player some powerful new attacks for a very limited time, and utilize the same process as the previous games. What was super disappointing, however, and something something I felt the lack of throughout my entire playthrough was that there was no World Tournament mode, which is something that I and many other fans of the series look forward to in DBZ games of this nature. However, other classics do make a triumphant return, like Duel Mode, where you can play your typical player versus com, 2-player, or our favorite, com versus com. What a great way to spend your time that must be. I found Duel Mode to be a good way to utilize all the characters and check out all the stages, at least those I didn't get a chance to in story mode. But beyond this, you have of course options mode and training, which for the latter I utilized to gain a better understanding of which attacks and combos work best and just practicing some lengthy combos in general. But to close out this video with a nice little bow on top, let's discuss our overall opinion on Infinite World, the good and the mediocre. Starting off with the pros. Infinite World was an incredible experience for me. I cannot stress that enough. With Budokai 3 not only just being one of my favorite of the original trilogy, but one of my favorite DBZ games of all time, this felt like an obvious progression to the series had they not gone with Budokai Tenkaichi instead. I absolutely love the way they pay homage to and utilize aspects from all 3 of the Budokai entries. It really feels like one final love letter to the Budokai series and DBZ games on the PS2 as a whole. And realistically, they didn't even have to do this. I mean, they probably were aware this wouldn't sell the best, especially given its time of release. However, and I don't mean this in such a negative way, but Infinite World doesn't really feel like Budokai 4. That's because the key upgrades from Budokai 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 just felt much more apparent than those from 3 to Infinite World. In fact, as we discussed, Infinite World carries over a lot from those games. But given the fact it was released at a very affordable price point, and even still is certainly a great game, I have no issue considering this the official Budokai 3.5 or even hell, Budokai 3.8. It has my favorite combat system by far in probably any DBZ game, and a pretty solid roster to boot. No character to me feels like a blatant cheap rip from another one like some games tend to do. As for the game's cons, no World Tournament is surely a huge one. Also, if I'm being a bit picky, from my experience, having to back out of story mode and jump into shop and then jump back into story mode simply to purchase supers for characters that are upcoming in battles, well, that became quite annoying and time consuming. And the massive difficulty spikes, especially to the Frieza fight, felt a bit out of place for a DBZ game. But to tell you the truth, in my personal preference, I kinda like that, because it makes you feel like you're really putting in work for all these skills. Anyway, to sum this up, this game is absolutely worth your time, DBZ fan or not. It's super underappreciated, and personally, if I had to rank it, I would rate it about a 9.3. It's really that good. Anyway, as always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you guys did enjoy this, please do me a huge solid by liking the video. Also in the comment section below, let me know if you guys want to see a part 2 of me completing Fighter's Road, and of course what you thought of the review in general. Do you guys agree with my points? Do you guys disagree? Make sure to subscribe if you guys haven't already. I plan on covering the entirety of the Tenkaichi series next, just in time for Sparking Zero to be released. Super hyped. Hope you guys are too. See you guys next time. Peace.
I guess I gotta go. Bye,